for joining us. Sorry, we are a few minutes later than expected. We had a few technical difficulties on our end. So it goes when you are remote. But today I have with me two very special guests. I've got Tom and Misty, both with NATP. Thanks for joining me, both of you. Mm-hmm. And
sure.
Yeah, I just want to start out real quick. Can you introduce yourselves?
Ladies first.
Well, my name is Misty Erickson, and I am the current tax content manager at NATP. I also have been working in taxes for, believe it or not, almost 17 years. Prior to this, I worked for the state of Minnesota as an auditor. I know the dark side. And then in my spare time during tax season, I will work on returns also for family and friends and sometimes help out at local firms. So fun and exciting.
Excellent. My name is Tom O'Savin. I am the Director of Tax Content and Government Relations for NATP. Like Misty, I've been a practitioner, but I've got about double the amount of time as a practitioner that Misty does, maybe longer than our host has been on Earth. But nonetheless, in my spare time, I'm also working in a tax practice. I work for Sue Voth, who was an instructor for NATP for many years and is also one of our Facebook friends. And yes, I will always believe that working with the tax returns helps what we do in content, and what we do in content helps with our members. So thanks everybody for joining us today.
Yeah. So we are talking today kind of a not really mid-season check-in, but more of just a check-in for tax season. Wanted to get your thoughts on how things are going, maybe what things are coming through our research department, just kind of get a general sentiment. So I guess to start out, Tom and Misty, what is the general sentiment this tax season? How are things going overall for both tax preparers and taxpayers?
Well, if you don't mind if I jump in, Misty, on this, it's a knock on wood. It's a bit quieter year than both the taxpayers and the tax professionals have experienced in the past several years with all of the COVID-19 pandemic related activity and law changes. We thought that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act was a big deal at the end of 2017, which it was, but it was just kind of the beginning of all of these pandemic responses that we had. And so probably for the first time with 2022, we're seeing a little bit of a return to normalcy. But with that, Misty and I were talking about this yesterday, and it's kind of like, well, we just got past Groundhog Day, and the groundhog peeks up out of the hole and says, well, is everything going to be okay? And I think that's kind of a theme as our clients are coming in to see us. They say, okay, now I've got my information together like I used to. Is this okay? And so what I see, and kind of a challenge to all of our attendees today and members in general, is that our clients really, really need our coaching. Even to get them back to a sense of normalcy, what is the right thing to do? What are the right questions that we ask them? And so that they can give us the best information possible and they can have the best tax result. What are your initial thoughts, Misty?
It's pretty much the same. People are hesitant. And I think part of the hesitancy too is that over the last couple of years, we've seen mid-season retroactive changes. So it is this, is it okay to file now? I think it is, but these last couple of years, we saw stuff come out in March. Now what? So, and we've all heard about how long it's taking for amended returns to get processed. So then it is very, it's touch and go. Do I file now? I'm ready. I have my documentation. Or do I wait a couple of weeks, but then now you're getting a delay if you're getting a refund? And then it also just has that trickle effect for tax preparers because now you're trying to get more in a shorter period of time. So it's very interesting, and it seems a little slow as well. And I think people are holding off just because they don't know.
That's interesting. What are, we talked a little bit about sentiment. So, but are there any general trends that you are both noticing? Any common issues that people are having, or anything like that you can share?
Probably, again, I'll jump in, Misty, if you don't mind. one of the things that I'm noticing is again, a need for education of our clients. And whether you're doing a live meeting or a Zoom call, something virtual like we're doing here, most of your softwares that you have, you can do a year-over-year comparison, and that really tells a great deal of information. We can demonstrate to our clients how we had a difference in the treatment, for example, in child tax credits in 2021, and also things like dependent care credit. And then you look at that, how that's different on the 2022 return, and then we can see then that 2021 was an anomaly. And we kind of go, I love to quote old rock and roll songs along with movies who know me. And so I say, in many ways, it's Days of Future Past from the theme from the Moody Blues. And the idea that we're back to kind of like the way things were in about 2019. So we can show that, we can demonstrate that to our clients. And for you also participating, there's also the notion that some of the things we may have learned very early in our career comes back to fruition now. That being, for example, all of the various states that did some kind of rebate or refund of monies to their citizenry. And the IRS said, whoa, hold off on filing these. We don't know whether or not it represents taxable income. Well, Misty and I could answer that question and say, well, first of all, you have to go back to before TCJA, when many more people itemized, and maybe you itemized deductions and they got a state tax refund. We talked about a notion called economic benefit. If there was an economic benefit, then money coming from the state represented income. So the fact that the IRS came along with a delay and gave us some guidance on what some of these were. I come from the state of Illinois. Ours were rebates, generally not taxable. But that being said, I think it behooves members to go back and think about some of the basics you learn in taxes, and that notion of economic benefit will address that. And also too, I think Misty commenting about people avoiding, if they can, filing amended returns.
Yeah, anything to add, Misty? Any general trends or things that you've noticed or been hearing?
And I think the general trend is it's kind of back to normal. Like I even look at, working in the research department, you kind of see calls and trends of calls, and there's not really a specific trend, meaning we're kind of back to the basics, you almost want to say. So in that case, there's no questions on, does this person qualify for a stimulus payment? What about the advance payments and the reconciliation? It's back to some of those, I call them the good tried and true basic type of questions, and some are not so basic, let's face it. And looking into those and diving into those tax laws that we're seeing. I mean, obviously, you get your same basis questions, and we did see an increase in home sales in 2022. So what does that mean? And just getting back to, like I said, getting back to those basic core concepts versus a 1-year law change that happened to take place.
Sure. There has been a lot of talk about refunds being smaller this year. Is that becoming an issue that either of you are seeing, as far as client relationships or any problems that's causing?
I'm seeing a little bit of that. Again, sorry to interrupt you, Misty, but I'll just jump right in and say, sounds like Sam's dogs have come to say hello. Here comes working remotely. We're all dog lovers. So that being said, the refunds are smaller when you take into consideration that people didn't have those advance payments. But when I love to show that year-over-year comparison within my software program, and the bottom line in many cases is very close to last year if you don't consider those advance payments. So that being said, yes, because the dependent care credit is less than half of what it was for that one blip of 2021. The child tax credits can be as much as half of what they were. Plus, if those children are over the age of 16, now they're out. So those types of issues as well. And I think the media has done a pretty darn good job of warning taxpayers about this. I'm finding, and not surprisingly, but a lot of the clients are pretty well informed about this information, but they're still like, okay, I want you as my tax professional to put a blessing on this, if this is exactly the way things are going. And then I think there's still, with that being a fact, there's still a thirst for planning. Okay, what should I do for next year? What are things that I'm contemplating? I kind of a set answer. You get kind of into a rhythm of tax season, and even if they hadn't done any energy improvements, for example, I said, listen, if you're contemplating an energy improvement, you might consider doing it over multiple years, because now we have annual credits for the next 10 years, which is new. Before we had that $500 lifetime credit. It expired at the end of 21. It was extended for 1 year, so that kind of seems confusing. And then it morphs itself into an annual credit beginning this year. So whether the client is asked or not, I said, well, if you're contemplating doing this, here's what I think you ought to do. And most people say, hey, good advice, something to think about. And one other thing I'll throw out is that I've been telling clients that even though they've been taking a standard deduction for several years now and may not have been able to deduct unreimbursed employee business expenses or maybe their medical expenses, I've told them, I don't want you to stop that process of gathering that data. Because face it, folks, believe it or not, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to expire in 2 short years. So will those provisions be continued? Don't know. But how about coaching our clients and keep them in the process of, this is what I do to get my tax stuff ready, and to not change that philosophy, even though we may not be using it now. I don't want to have to re-educate them, when they say, well, Tom, for the last 3 years, you told me not to do that. Now you're telling me to do it again. Well, I think rather get it together. What's the harm? You're used to that process. Listen, I think one of the big takeaways we should have for our clientele is that they only do this once a year. We do this multiple hundreds of times in cases. Some of you out there do it multiple thousands of times. Remember, our clients doing it once. So if you only do things once, it's hard to remember, isn't it?
Makes sense. Anything to add, Misty?
I think Tom hit it on the head. I mean, it's great to have a check-in on where we're at, but it feels so different, at least in my eyes, over the last 3 years. And granted, it is early on in the season. Hopefully we don't have any retroactive changes. But with the refunds, yes, again, it's the education side of it. I mean, I know at least when it comes to family and friends and stuff like that, it's trying to forewarn, because if they have the information ahead of time, you're setting up that expectation. And if they know what to expect, it's a lot easier than trying to explain it in the tax office, because you may be caught off guard. And if you really haven't dove into, well, why was it different? Then it just feels like you're scrambling. So the more you can do, if you sent out letters ahead of time explaining, these are the changes that we're going to see for 2022, and here's why you can expect, potentially a smaller refund, that helps just long term, and it can cut down on some headaches. Now, granted, they got to open the letter, but still, it's a small step that can be taken.
Definitely. What, we mentioned, the past few years or so, there has been some mid-tax season guidance come through. What should people keep their ears and eyes open for? Is there anything that we're expecting, to be coming down the pipeline, or anything we're waiting for?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head that is any pending legislation or pending guidance that we're waiting on per se. I don't know if you see any, Misty.
No, I mean, I know we reached out and wanted to ask. When I say we, NATP reached out and was seeking guidance for ERC and how that works. And that was in our Tax Pro
That's right.
Weekly. I think it was about 2 weeks ago, and just talking about how liable a preparer is. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Just because you prepare their business returns doesn't necessarily mean you were the one who was helping with that application for ERC. So there can be some hesitancy on that. So hopefully we'll see some guidance on that. I think the IRS did come out with the guidance regarding those state rebates and state refunds, and we are seeing questions on, should I amend? And Tom and I actually we were discussing this yesterday in detail on, well, should they or shouldn't they? And unlike what we've seen in the past, for example, with the unemployment exclusion, the IRS was pretty upfront saying, don't amend, we'll fix it for you. We haven't seen that. So at this point, it looks like you're going to have to. And the guidance regarding the rebates and refunds was again about 2 weeks ago. So are they going to come out and say don't amend? I mean, when you think about how matching works and how you can pull that information off the return, I don't see a way that will be as easy as it was with the unemployment compensation. So end result is probably going to be that amended return. Um, Other than that, I mean, it seems pretty calm and quiet. Anything that I've seen, because I was looking at some information this morning, they're talking September, which is well after the filing deadline, at least without the extend. So there really isn't much. So really what you're left into is just getting back into that, how can you help plan with clients and looking at the opportunities on a return of how you can save them some money. For example, contributing to an HSA is one option. Make sure to check out those W-2s and see if there's a code. I believe it's a code W on if they've made employee contributions. Maybe they can max out. And especially if you're seeing a smaller refund, there's opportunities. Granted, they have to have the money now, but when you talk about long-term savings, it's better for the client.
Mm-hmm. And so you kind of talked to, are alluding to this, but when you're working with a tax professional, there are, some perks to working with someone who does this for a living, knows, the tax law in and out. In both of your opinions, why is it beneficial to work with a tax preparer?
Well, I'll jump in on this, Misty. The idea being, and that really is a big responsibility, ladies and gentlemen who are participating on the call this morning, is that our clients expect that we know what's going on. And so again, remember, they're doing this once for this year. We do it. It's our profession. So they expect that we know what's going on. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers off the top of your head, but at least to say, I heard something about that, and let me take a look at my notes or a resource that I can go to. You can't possibly have all of the nuances of tax law in your mind, but having a general direction to go, because they're putting their faith in you. It's no different than if you go to a doctor or you go to an auto mechanic and you have you have an Audi and you go to the Audi dealership. We expect the Audi dealership to know all the ins and outs of things that could be wrong with that specific model. It's the same thing with your taxes. They come to us as a professional. Be prepared to be that professional. So you keep up with your continuing education. Misty mentioned the Tax Pro Weekly. We have ongoing webinars and self-study throughout the tax season. We have the research department. So there are resources there to help you help your client, because that's what they're paying for. They're not paying for your software. They're paying for your knowledge. And I think that's an important consideration. And one little other point I want to put in before throwing it to Misty, if I can give some advice to those, again, who are on the call as practitioners, if you can avoid amending returns this year, I know there may be some circumstances where we have to, for example, with the rebates that may have been claimed as income, try to avoid it. Not to get too granular, but new client comes in, says their company converted to an S Corp last year. They've already been told they won't get their K-1s till September. So what the client says is, Tom, what do we do? And I said, here's what we do. We guesstimate what we think the income is going to be, and we file an extension, because we know the amended return process is a manual process, even when electronically submitted. We were actually told that by the Deputy Commissioner of the IRS, that it's still a manual process. So if you can avoid it at any way, then prepare your client for the fact that the extension is in time to file, not in time to pay. So trying to make sure we have some kind of calculation to be able to give an idea of what tax needs to be paid by April 18th, and then file the extension and stay in contact with your client throughout the summer. I know a lot of people, after tax season's over, they like to put it aside and forget about it, until the extensions come up. But I think we're going to have more and more of that. And I'll throw one more thing out there that, NATP is doing outreach to Congress to have an open discussion about what is the proper filing deadline. And that's where we also advocate for you, our membership, on realizing that, April 15th may not be appropriate anymore with all of the background work that has to be done with entities and trusts and estates. and partnerships and S corporations and all the various credits they have to deal with, that maybe there should be a different filing deadline. And again, we're looking for open communication with Treasury, with Congress, and the IRS in addressing just that. So, Misty, your thoughts on using a tax professional as opposed to going it on your own?
Well, I can use real life family stories. And if my sister's watching, I apologize. So with that said, she is not a tax person. I am, right? And you just know certain things. You know what to look for, key components. She uses a tax software. That's fine. I supported her decision. She has consistently been contacted for errors on her return. And I'm like, girl, let me do your return for you. Please, let's save some headache for yourself, not to mention money. So at the end of the day, even though it feels like it's simple, or if you have a change in life or anything, you doing your own returns, having kind of that peace of mind that somebody's going to be more on top of those things that you need to know, especially like I said, those life changes, they're going to be able to look at that return and say, here are the things that you need to know. Here's how we can coach you into helping you through this process versus going at it alone. And even as a practitioner, when you think of any NATP member, they're not going at it alone. They have the support of our organization. So just having that peace of mind, I think, is huge. And kudos to those. I do have family members who do their own. And if they're not sure, they do reach out and say, hey, can you take a look at this? And I'm like, absolutely. And trust me, I've offered, the returns are free. I don't charge, but sometimes there's still that, well, I want to do it by myself. Love it, but okay, let's be realistic sometimes on whether or not that's a good idea or not.
Well, and I think that, kind of goes to a bigger point of, transitioning from preparing returns to tax planning, and really working with those clients year round and being that resource. Do both of you, kind of have an opinion about if that is becoming a bigger trend? Is the tax planning part of a tax preparer's job?
I'll jump in on this one too, Misty. Absolutely. I think that that's part and parcel of what we do, literally. And it can be happening during the course of a meeting. For example, Misty mentioned seeing a W-2 and it has code W on it, which means there's an HSA. In talking about that as you're going through the process, many times, a client will say, well, I have questions at the end, and I'll say, why don't you ask them as we're going along? Because there can be planning that's happening just in that, like with the HSA, where it becomes not you're just kind of grunting and typing away on your keyboard and then telling them here's the result, but rather here's the impact of your return. And yes, they're looking for something a little bit more than just here's the bottom line number. And that in that respect, I think that people that drop off their returns or just upload to a portal and say, just give me the results, they're actually missing out. And I have those clients just like everyone does. It just says, just do it. If you have issues, talk to me. But even at that, where they're not wanting a whole lot of content, I will point out, here's the result. Here's what last year was. I still want to ask you, did you do this, or that? Or are you thinking about it? So a little bit of indirect planning to say, hey, I'm thinking about your circumstances more than just here's the numbers. If you don't have all your numbers in front of me, I don't know. I guess I didn't get them. But to help that client help themselves, and I really think that's our job more than anything.
Nice. We have to talk a little bit about membership, benefits of being an NATP member. Not have to, we get to, we want to, of course, NATP membership is very valuable for preparers. But I want both of you to highlight, if you don't mind, some benefits that are useful specifically during this time of year for our members.
Well, I'll jump on that one. So when you talk about benefits of membership, one is we do have, our research department. And I think it's one of those where I do realize some people get into the profession because they like the research side of it. But there's also a cost benefit. Are you going to spend 2 hours doing the research on it where you can maybe get another return or two done during that time frame instead of passing it off. And we tell members all the time, don't be hesitant on passing that feedback off to your client in that case. On top of it, we have our Tax Pro Weekly. So if there are things that are really relevant that you need to keep your eyes open for, because let's face it, you kind of bury your head into tax season, you're working on those returns, you at least have that quick read, here's what I need to know, and to keep it in the back of your mind. And if there's nothing pressing, you can go, okay, I'm good, and set it aside. So those are really key concepts as well. And some of the things that we've been trying recently is trying to get some webinars that are real relevant to what you guys are seeing. So if you do have a new concept walking across your desk, we might have a webinar during tax season, and they could be on demand, so you can take them when you need to. So make sure that you're kind of utilizing those benefits as well. And those are just a couple of them off the top of my head. Tom, I don't know if you have any more to add.
Well, my comments actually parrot right off of yours, and my experience has been firsthand. As a member of NATP, very very early on in my career, and it's always given me a sense of relief or comfort in that. We've experienced a lot through COVID of how we've all kind of lived in our own little cocoons, but for all the years that I've been a member, I feel as though NATP has my back, and by that I mean, if something happens, bang, I'm going to get an alert about it. I'm not going to have to keep, a news program on all day long, trying to watch it while I'm doing returns. NATP is going to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Misty mentioned the Tax Pro Weekly. No matter what I've been doing in my practice for all of these years, I've always read the you make the call question, which I used to call the stumping the band question. I'm dating myself from Johnny Carson days, but I always took at least a couple of minutes to read that you make the call to see if I knew the answer. And get a quick little education. Save the Tax Pro monthlies. There may have been an article. I don't have time to read it now, but I want to have that resource because I'm thinking, if NATP is telling me about this, I need to know it. So that's been kind of my attitude, that the organization, has my back. And I've often said it's like having, for a sole practitioner, it's like your back office. So if I need to know it, they're going to tell me. And that gives quite a degree of comfort.
Definitely. And speaking of the Tax Pro Monthly, we had in, I believe it was our December or January issue, the quick reference guide. So that's, an easy thing that preparers can have on hand to reference if they need. If you're not a member and you are interested in learning what your career could be with NATP membership, we do have a free 30-day trial. No credit card required, no strings attached. You get to completely just test us out, see what it's like. And so that is really all that I have for both of you, Tom and Misty, unless there's anything else you think you want to add or touch on. Again, just kind of a quick check-in. How are things going? It sounds like, knock on wood, pretty smoothly.
That's what I'm saying. Knock on wood. I would encourage our practitioners out there, don't forget about yourself and your family. Take some time, whether it's a early Sunday morning breakfast with your family or to check in or just to have a little bit of me time, and don't forget that. My favorite friend whose tax season has been Mountain Dew and chocolate, and I wouldn't recommend that to most anyone because then you spend the rest of the year trying to undo all of those bad habits. But don't forget yourself. You're there for your clients, but you're also providing a service, and you have family members that need you too.
Mm-hmm. Anything else that you'd like to add, Misty? Any parting words or tips or pieces of advice?
Really good luck. I hope this tax season is a little smoother. It feels like it. Hopefully this trend continues. Let's face it, I think we all could use a tax season without a mid-season tax change and just be able to get through it and breathe.
Yeah.
Which would be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your insight and your time. And hopefully we will do this again a little bit later in tax season, and hopefully things will stay the same. But thanks again for joining me, and thanks everyone for watching. If you ever, have any questions or anything, or need anything, natptax.com is our website. Feel free to check it out. Again, join the trial if you're not a member and you're interested. And make sure to, like and subscribe on our social media channels for more updates like this one. So that is all I have for you. Thanks again, guys, for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.